Today, we're looking at Colorverse Lights on Ceres. Now, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, I test them, I share the results with you. Colorverse Lights on Ceres is a magenta-y red type ink. To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I put the ink into a different pen for a day. I then put it into a Pierre Cardin President with a medium nib to take my notes for this video. Now, before we get to the writing samples, let's look at the sciencey bits. Up first is a chromatography, and I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down, and I immediately dunk it into water. 10 to 15 seconds, and we see that this immediately pushes straight up the paper. We just get a true magenta all the way up, and it just gets darker as the ink's been pushed up. It makes me feel that there's no resistance immediately. Now, the one on the right, I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. That magenta line across the bottom is very dark, very there. It really sunk into this filter paper. That then made me say maybe there is a little bit of resistance with this ink. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it might be to clean from your pens. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, it handles it for the most part very well. That lowercase h at the top has a lot of blooming out, but it doesn't make me feel that it destroys it so that I could not read it. So it feels safe to use in a note-taking situation. Water reactivates all the darker tones, but leaves the lighter kind of pink with this very, very light magenta-y pink color. It didn't take it all off the paper. We go to Pen Flush, and Pen Flush did everything water did and a slight bit more. Just a little bit more, but still a lot left. Very noticeable where that ink was put onto the paper. Interestingly, or very surprisingly, bleach did not obliterate it. There is a very distinct amount of ink that's left behind. This, I think, is the first time with Colorverse that I've seen this happen. So this particular ink, test it in a more inexpensive pen before you put it into your expensive pen, just to make sure that it wouldn't stain anything. For the inks I've tested, I've found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Colorverse Lights on Ceres has a viscosity of 2.16, making it just inside normal. To find my average dry times, I use the extra fine and medium nib on the writing samples of Clairefontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. I average those. For the inks I've tested, I have found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Colorverse Lights on Ceres has an average dry time of 14 seconds, making it normal, lower side of normal, just like the viscosity was, which I always appreciate when when an ink shows up like that on both bell curves. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in sample form, and to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at Clairefontaine. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade. It's a really neat color here. It becomes lighter when we go to extra fine, a lighter tone with no feather, spread, halo, sheen. It has spots of shading throughout, and when it does have it, it is beautiful. The is very dark, and then it gets light at quick and works its way darker. Brown starts dark and works its way lighter. Fox starts light and works its way darker. It's neat how it's like going in and out. It's like a wave of light and dark. 9 seconds to dry. Medium, no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and yes, we do get some of that shading again, some of that same effect. Quick starts dark, gets light, gets darker again. Brown starts very light and works its way dark. Fox starts light and works its way dark. Over is very light, and R is very dark in the over. 12 seconds to dry. The scrubby of the extra fine and the medium shows a little bit of color variation, but I think we saw more in the writing sample than what we actually saw in the scrubby, and the smear test says we could likely recover it if we smeared while we were writing. Tomoe River. No bleeding. We do have ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade, but a really neat magenta red. Makes me think pink sometimes. It's neat because this color gives so many colors. It's going to be hard to classify. The extra fine, no feather spread, halo sheen, no shading. It is noticeably a lighter tone than we got with the 1.1. It took 16 seconds to dry. I think the color of this ink is worth 16 seconds. The medium has no feather spread, halo sheen. It also has no shading. It is a darker tone than we got with the extra fine. It's a hair lighter than the 1.1. It's really close. It's just a tone or two lighter than we got with the 1.1. 21 seconds to dry. I think it's a great looking color, and 21 seconds is worth it. The scrubby for both showed us no color variation. We didn't expect it, we didn't get it, and the smear test, you couldn't recover it. So what about Rhodia paper? Rhodia gives no bleeding and no ghosting. The 1.1 gives no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and no shade on this paper with the 1.1. Noticeably lighter tone with the extra fine, no feather spread, halo sheen, and we are getting some shading. Now the K is much darker than the rest of Quick. The BR is darker than the OW, and the N gets dark again. The FO is very light and the X gets dark, so it gets really nice shading through here, and 10 seconds to dry. Now a noticeably darker tone with the medium. No feather, spread, halo, sheen, and unfortunately no shade for the medium, but that's because it's that darker tone all of a sudden. 13 seconds to dry. The scrubby of the extra fine shows us some color variation, and the scrubby of the medium shows us none. That is what we got with the writing sample, and you could recover this. What happens if I try this on yellow background paper? So yellow Rhodia, no bleeding and no ghosting. We sort of expect it to perform the same way there as the white Rhodia. It's still Rhodia. What happens to the tone? The 1.1's the same, the extra fine's the same. The medium looks a little darker. So that's kind of interesting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine has no feather spread, halo sheen, but it does still have its shading that it had with the white paper. K is still a bit darker. In the, it starts light and gets dark at the H and light at the E. Fox starts very light and gets dark. Jumps starts dark, gets light, and gets dark again. Over stays very light, and the is very dark. Nice. 10 seconds to dry. The medium becomes a darker tone, and it's the same. It's a matching tone as the 1.1 now. That's the effect of the yellow background paper. That means that this is not an entirely opaque ink. The medium has no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. 13 seconds to dry. The scrubby of the extra fine shows some color variation, and we got some. And the scrubby of the medium shows us none. We didn't get any. Smear test, you could still recover it. Life paper. Life gives no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen. It does offer some really cool shading. It starts dark, the top of the L is very light, it comes back to being dark, and the R to the beginning of V gets light again. Gets dark, gets light at the RS, and dark again in the S to E. Very neat. Extra fine, a much lighter tone than we got with the 1.1. No feather, spread, halo, sheen. Yes, we get great shading. The starts light, gets dark, gets light again. Quick, dark to light to dark. Brown starts dark and gets light. Fox starts light and gets dark. Beautiful. 8 seconds to dry. Medium, a noticeably darker tone with no feather, spread, halo, sheen. We have shading here. Quick, starts dark and gets light, gets dark again. Brown, the beginning of the brown is very light and then it goes dark. Fox starts at a nice mid-tone, gets dark. Beautiful stuff. The, right in between the T and the H, it gets really light. It's beautiful. And 13 seconds to dry. When we look at the scrubby, the extra fine shows us plenty of color variation. The medium shows us almost none. That's wrong. We got color variation in both the extra fine and the medium for the writing. I just think it leveled out in the scrubby. And the smear test, you could recover it if you smeared this while you were writing. Levenger paper. I love it. I don't love its super thin lines.
No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and it has shade. Now the shade that's going on is that very gradual light to dark, like when you're looking at a color chart. When it really shows in Ceres. It goes from very dark at the top of the C and it works its way lighter through all the way through the R and then starts getting darker again on the ES. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful to look at. Extra fine is a noticeably lighter tone with no feather, spread, halo, sheen. I don't see the shading coming through here. It only took 5 seconds to dry. It is a really neat looking color. Medium, a noticeably darker tone. I think it's a little bit darker, about a tone or two darker than the 1.1. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen. I don't see any shading coming through on this medium. It took 10 seconds to dry. The scrubby of the extra fine shows some color variation. We didn't get it up here. The scrubby of the medium shows us none. We didn't get any. The smear test says you could likely recover it if you smeared while you were writing. And that is all that I have for the writing sample.
Instead of finding inks that look like Colorverse lights on Ceres, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. Now, being a very bright color in the way it is, I thought a nice dark color that wasn't so dark like black. I went with Diamine's Macassar because it's a very nice brown ink. Before I give my opinion on this ink, I would ask, if you've enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. And if it's your first time here, I would invite you to subscribe. So what do I think of Colorverse lights on Ceres? It does something very interesting with, as it's a red magenta, but as reds go, they don't tend to shade very often for me. This one does offer some shading, which is very nice. As a color alone, I don't know that I want to write a page with it. I don't tend to really go with reds and magentas. So for me, this is a great complement color on a page. I would absolutely use it to help edit my notes for things. I just don't know about doing all of the writing itself. But this is a very nice ink. Thanks for watching.